All right, guys, welcome. We're going to do an end of the day recap, and I'm going to cover the price action for today. We had a couple breakdowns. We had the bear raid yesterday where they tried to get bears off of their short positions. Today, more selling. So we're going to go through those the indices. I'm going to cover some of the FANG stocks, which are, which have the power to move the market. So it's important to watch those FANGs. We're going to look at a couple subscribers stocks that they've wanted me to look at, and we'll wrap up. And then tomorrow I'll put out the weekly chart analysis, just covering what the bigger picture is and the weekly trends, which set up, the weekly charts set up the next months to even years potentially in terms of the major trends. So it's important to keep an eye on that. We look at that once a week. I'll put that out tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Let's get into it. Triple Qs. All right, support right here at 275, 274.90, somewhere right in there. And we are right below it. We're going to, they'll probably close it. We're going to close here in 4 minutes. I'm sure they'll close it right about that 274.90 level. So we'll watch that, but I suspect that's where it's going to close. And it'll keep everyone guessing where things are heading next week. That's pretty common. They like to do that. And then you wake up to a gap. Then Sunday night you get a big gap, a move down in the futures, and Monday it's a gap down or a gap up. Very common. So that's what happened as of today. We are, if you look at the daily chart here, you can see here. One thing to point out, we did have a doji right here. It is a what do they call this one? Not quite a dragonfly. It's like a hanging man doji. The tail's not that long though, so that's why I wasn't too interested in it being a great doji. I like to see a longer tail, but it is a doji, so understand that. We also had a doji right here, which was, we had that doji right there, and we had a little bit of confirming selling, but then it just was negated. Usually you want to see a nice impulsive sell-off after a doji to signal a reversal, and that's what we have today. So today came with the big gap down, and we're closing pretty much down near the lows of the day. Not quite the lows, but down near the lows. So a week close on for the day with that doji sets up continued downside pressure. So next week, I think we've got this gap right here. Looking at the hourly, we've got this gap, which puts us up at about 272.30, or no, actually, sorry, a little bit higher, 272.40. So I think we'll hit that next week. We might reverse off that level, but if we go lower than that, we've got, I've had this level here for a while, this green one, 267.85. Yeah, it's about 267.75. Now again, when I say 267.75, it could be 268.30. It could be in a range of 50 cents or so. So just keep that in mind. But I got 267.75. So if we break down and we break below this gap and continue to sell off, then that's our next level to watch. So below that, and we've got bigger problems to the downside basically. So we're going to watch that for next week. That's kind of what I think is in play, those levels. Again, if we hold right here where we're at today, then, and we hold this level, then the top right up here where they were setting, that resistance is going to be your level 260 or 280, 280.50, basically 280.40. That is the level to watch. A break back up into that area. If we break back up there, then I think there's really nothing in between. There's no more resistance that I can really cleanly see up there. I mean, we've got a little bit, but for the most part, I think you got a back test on your hands of the trend line, which is way up here. Where do we get that trend line? Well, that trend line comes, from the 2020 uptrend. So here it is on the weekly chart. This is your uptrend right there. And if you look at the daily, There it is. Clearly we broke. We back tested right there. We're kind of starting to do another back test, but now what looks like a bear raid, and we're starting to break down. So if I had to guess, I'd say we're going lower. That's where my money's at, and that's how I'm going to play it. Okay, the market's closed, so you can see we did close below that resistance. Not much, but we'll see how they, I think there's about 45 minutes for them to kind of shore up the final trade. So we'll see where that kind of rounds out the week. Moving on to the SPY. SPY, SPY didn't sell off nearly as much. Most of the sell-off action was in the Qs, and the SPY actually did relatively, it was hurt, but not quite as badly. However, without tech, the SPY just can't go up. It doesn't have to sell off as hard, but it just can't move higher because of the huge weighting of Apple and Microsoft, essentially. So, Qs being down a lot, SPY down about 1%. Let's see what the equal weighted sector was down. Equal weighted sector was actually up. So today was really, the weakness today was in the FANG stocks. And if you can see that here on the QQQE, I suspect it's not down as much as the triple Qs. About 2.4. So yeah, not quite as much. Tech was weak across the board. But again, most of the weakness today was in tech, not in the SPY. And so people were buying some of the value stocks, apparently. And so SPY, we've got a level here. I've got kind of lines going all over the place. I've got this gap. We've got this zone right here where we basically have some support. You can see here at 331.20, and then we've got a gap at 329.58. So I suspect those levels will be near-term levels of support. But again, watch the Qs, because I think the Qs will be a signal in terms of what this thing does in general. If the Qs breaks those key support levels, the SPY is probably going to follow if it hasn't already broken those key support levels. Here's some volatility, UVXY. I'm still bullish on this VIX, and I'm long. I do have I'm long, the VIX, using these instruments. I'm actually using VXX is the one I'm long, but they're for the most part the same. And here's what we got. We've got a downtrend line right here. We broke to the upside here, and then we've just been back testing support the entire time. We test support, we break to the upside, and that's really what I see on the hourly. If you look at the daily here, you can see we've just broken up. Now, we've kind of just gone sideways, but I do think we're in for some sort of a lift off. We've seen volatility rise slightly, but nothing impulsive. So I don't think the selling is going to be over in the Qs till you see some sort of a break higher in the VIX. I'd expect we'd get up or over, we've got a couple targets here. One, we obviously have the previous highs right there that we just peaked at, which sit on this one at about 31.90, and then we've got another peak right up here, which is sitting about 42. So those are my targets. Somewhere in there, kind of a target, first target, second target. I'll take a little profit at the first target, and ride the trade up for the second target with less of a position. So that's how I trade. When you put a trade on, always establish your profit targets, and I lighten the trade as I go into profit. So once you're right, it makes it very difficult to be wrong if you trade, take some off as you go. So usually on my first target, I'll take about half off, and then I will ride the rest up to the second target. Small caps actually caught a bid today. They were up. So again, people were basically selling FANG and buying real economy stuff, I guess. That probably a lot of value. And so, small caps are just in this sideways trading range. Top of the range, 159.50. Bottom of the range, 145, we'll call it 145.70 or 145.50. Right now we're just right in the middle, so nothing to do there. Here's gold. Gold closed the day below resistance. It's just marginally below resistance right there at 1901. This is gold bullion. The reason why I watch gold is I trade the gold miners. So I'm looking for gold to tell me when's a good time to start looking for entries on the gold miners. And as of right now, I think gold's going lower. We just basically closed. You can see here on gold, this line right here, we've been, this resistance right here at about 1908 or 1907 has been support for quite a while when we were up here. Then we broke support impulsively, and we just came in for a back test and closed basically right there. So I think next week we should start to fail. And you'll see signs of failure in gold coming down to 1790 is the target. And that's what we're going to continue to go with. So I'll continue to watch these gold miners. But if gold continues to do what I think it's going to do, then I'm not interested in being long the gold miners until we get down to major support in gold. And then I'll start looking for, you know, some entry points in these gold miners. Longer term, I'm bullish on gold though. Dollar closed right at support. So dollar looks good. I mean, if you look at it objectively, we broke above this resistance here, came back and back tested and held. And so there was no breakdown in the dollar, and the momentum is clearly still up. I don't see any negative divergences. So I think we've got kind of a final move up in the dollar up to 95. We could even overshoot. We probably will overshoot slightly, but up around 95.50, and then we'll start to look for signs of weakness. FANG stocks. All right, Apple. Looking at Apple, very weak close. You can see we obviously closed right there near the low. Let's look at the hourly here and see where we actually closed at. All right, so on the hourly, you know, we've got some, it's right there. There's your support in Apple, near term at least. Right there. You can see all the closes that we've had moving it out, where we held support, broke down. Here, it was support right through here. Then it was resistance here. Then we broke up, and it's been support pretty much all week. And, well, not all week, but since the, 25th. And then, and we closed right at support. So Apple closed at support. They are going to leave us guessing. Microsoft looks a little weaker. Looking at this guy, I see, yeah, I don't see, this is kind of a real chop zone right in here. I've got a level marked out back here. Carry that one forward. You know, so I don't know. I think we closed right below or right above this support level. Really choppy right in here. In general, to me, it looks weak. Also, if you want to look at the bigger picture, head and shoulders pattern potential. So you've got the left shoulder, head, right shoulder. So a break of this neckline sets Microsoft in motion to the downside. So watch for that next week. Amazon, also a potential head and shoulders pattern here on Amazon. I'm just kind of noticing it, but you can see this is kind of your right shoulder right in there. And then you've obviously got the head where we peaked above that, and then kind of making this left shoulder. So whether it wants to chop around in here for a little while, it's completely possible. But, you know, you don't really want to see prices move. For this head and shoulders pattern to be still plausible, you wouldn't really want to see prices moving back up in this area. Just something to look at. Erase that for a second. Now we'll go here to the hourly. All right, so Amazon clearly closed, you know, down on the day. Really weak action here in Amazon, and you can see in the morning they popped it up. The dip buyer stepped in, and then they faded it the rest of the day. So sellers faded it into the close. If the market didn't close, it probably would have continued to be faded at least down. We've got some gap support right down here, so perhaps they step in there. And I also see some support right here at 3,078. So watch for that. But pretty weak price action there. So something to look at. Google's 10 has recently kind of been the weaker of the bunch. Google, here's the resistance that I had. We peaked above it just the other day, well, yesterday actually, with that bear raid, and then sold it down, and dip buyer stepped in the morning and they sold it down the rest of the day. So really, you had a little bit of morning buying and then selling the rest of the day into the close. That's weak. Weak close. Should be more downside next week on this one. This Redfin, I keep an eye on it because all the Mania stocks, these stay-at-home trade stocks, have pretty much been a kind of a retail mania. So I'm looking for momentum to fade and everyone to scatter as fast as possible. So that's what I'm starting to see in some of these. Redfin here. This is a daily chart, and you can see here, this is negative divergence. We had negative divergence before, right there, where you made a high right there, and then this peak made a higher high, so a divergent high, and then we're just kind of extending that negative divergence now, making a new kind of marginal high, just barely actually, it looks like. Well, it made it yesterday, just a new marginal high. So it's a divergent high. You can see the RSI is making a lower peak. So we're running out of steam. Now you just have to wait for the trend line break. Looking at trend support. All right, so this one, the way I'd play this one is you've got this trend right there. Let's see here. Yeah, it's right about there, and we close just below it. So we'll see. If you get a nice, it was just marginally below it, and that's not good enough for a sell signal. If you want to see a gap down or an impulsive red candle, some sort of a trigger, impulsive trigger. So what I would be looking for is that candle or that gap down to be your sell signal. And then that should set up a move all the way down to the bottom here of support. If I go to the daily, you can see we've got a couple reactions down here. So that should set that move up. And that's probably going to sit around, it depends on when we get there, 45, 50 or so. And then a break of that sets this thing, we'll set this thing in motion, probably down to 31 and then potentially lower. All right, Tesla, and then I'll get into a couple comments, subscriber stocks I want to look at. All right, so Tesla broke support today. Here's the hourly. You can see the support line that we've been walking up is this red line right here. We've just been walking up this really since March. We broke it once, was a bear trap, broke it twice. This wasn't really a bear trap because it wasn't impulsive. You didn't see the shorts covering, basically. On this one here, when it broke, the shorts scrambled and covered, and that's why you get this big impulsive move up. And that's what that was. But here, when it broke up, they didn't really cover. It just was kind of grinding higher. There was no impulsive liftoff. And then, boom, sold back down in one day and broke support, closing below support again. So we were down there once, we're down there again. This is actually the third time we've been below this trend line. I think third time's a charm, to be honest, in this one. In the daily, we've had negative divergence in play for quite a while. You can see here on the daily, negative divergence. This high was a lower peak in momentum on both the RSI and the PPO. So you're just, it's signaling momentum's dying, and then you're looking for trend support or, support to break, basically, trend line support to break. It broke just briefly today. Look for some sort of big, nasty red candle next week to signal that this thing's going to start to roll over pretty quickly. Targets for this is obviously down here. These gaps, 246, 224, and potentially this gap way down here at 131. A couple areas there. And there's also, it looks like we've got some support right here at 180. So those are levels to watch. Okay, Carvana. I have not been watching this one. There's only so many I can watch. But, all right, here's what we got going on. Here's your trend line in the daily. That's kind of that's the cleanest trend line I can make, where we have a nice clean trend. We broke trend here back in September 4th, broke trend, with follow through, multiple candles confirming the break in trend. Then you get a big old gap, must have been earnings there or something, a big gap, but it really just gapped right up there to trendline support, chopping around a little bit, but this looks like a back test to me. This cluster right up here looks like a back test, and the next move I would look for is a move down for a gap fill down to 174.65. Let's see if we have divergence, and we do. Negative divergence, clean and clear here on the daily. Right there is the RSI divergence where momentum was fading even though price was making slightly higher highs. And that's what you want to look for, slightly higher highs on weaker momentum, diverging momentum. So lower peak, slightly higher high in price. Here's a lower peak again, slightly higher high in price right there. Negative divergence, back test at resistance. I'm looking at lower prices in this one, down to, from where we're at down to gap fill, 21, 20, almost 22%. I think that's that'd be my first target right there, and probably get a reaction there. And then I think if we go lower, I could see us heading down to, it's a pretty thin area. So if we go lower, I could see us getting down to, I guess probably right there. We'll have to watch that one, down to 116. But for sure that 175, 75, or, right in that area, 175-ish. That would be my first target. Okay, I pointed this run one out, I think the other day. I don't see anything. All right, here's what I see in this one. Looking at it, we have an uptrend. It's a clean and clear uptrend. It's not been broken, so the trend is still up. We have momentum indicators telling us the trend is losing steam. The divergences were just extended recently, but they are negative divergences. So what that means is you've got a peak right here with the high of the RSI, and then all this price action right here has been lower momentum. So it's thinning out, basically. The momentum is starting to fade. However, this thing's way up above the trend line that I can make. So what I would be looking for, you're going to have to tighten this one up, but I suspect it's going to come back into this trend line for another test. And on this one, I'm just not really interested in shorting this one or anything. It's really far away. You could say there's just nothing super clean. It's about right there. So we might have just broke trend line support in the short term, setting this thing up for a move back down to the more major trend line, which is all the way down here. But there's other things. Carvana looks a lot better. This obviously could be a short, but and if you're long, if you're long for the long term, then you have this longer term trend line right here on the daily that you'd want to see hold. And as long as that holds, this thing can continue to move higher. I do think it's probably going to come back in for a back test of that, though. We'll wrap up here with my this long that looks pretty good. A little pullback right here. So we could chop around in this area for a little while, but in general, I expect this to hold support in this area. We shouldn't undercut these lows at this point in Philip Morris PM, which is sitting at about 73.47. No, 73.45. So price action below there, you might want to stop out, is what I would say. I do expect we hold in this area, and don't really go much below that 73.45 area. So hourly closes below 73.45, unless it's just pennies below that, then I would probably stop out below that. Otherwise, I look for this. I had this flag. I was kind of trying to see if we got a flag, and maybe we're flagging out. There's not enough data to say where the flag's at yet. Maybe we're doing something like this. I can adjust it. Could be it looks like a bull flag So flagpole, flag, we're going to flag up, move on up to probably this 76 area, but ultimately I see 77.50 in the cards in the future. And we've got bullish divergences that have been in play for a while. So in general, it's working. You know, the divergences are working out. They are, you know, starting to hold, and we're starting to see some bullish momentum and some bullish price action. So I like that one. I'm going to wrap up here. Leave it at that. Anybody who's interested in anything else, leave it in the comments. I'll try to get to it. Tomorrow we'll put out the weekly chart analysis. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Leave me that thumbs up, too. I do appreciate that. Bye.